Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Iowa Chill Show. We had a good time talking with Keith, I'd say.
Keith, we kind of started off in the beginning of the podcast telling us how his origins of how he got involved with the state of Iowa, what he appreciates about the state of Iowa. And as the episode went on, I found a little bit more enjoyable. I'm like, I like chatting to this dude. He's got a cool perspective on a lot of stories too that involves perspective on the state of Iowa.
Very insightful, willing to share some of the inside stories. That was a lot of fun and goofy. You can tell he's meant for
one of those moments remind me just like Chris Hassell when he won that little rampage with the Iowa fans yelling, "You were wrong." I saw so much Chris Hassell. We're gonna have to cut that clip and play it on social media for sure. That was hilarious.
Absolutely. I was giggling. I couldn't help myself. That was pretty funny. So I hope everyone gets to enjoy the episode. Before we get started, we got to do a little shout out for Cookies barbecue sauce. It's the sauce that America loves to eat and needs to be on every Iowan's table. You can find Cookies barbecue at Fairway, Hy-Vee, any local grocery store, or on cookiesbarbecue.com. Remember, smart cookies love cookies.
That's right. All right. Well, before we want to jump into the Keith Murphy podcast, state of Iowa's hot. Iowa State women's basketball just knocked off Baylor's 61 home game winning streak. Iowa men's basketball continues to be hot. They've claimed a tie for first place in the Big Ten Conference. Michigan. Big news.
Michigan had a huge win against Wisconsin and then had a little falter on Sunday.
Minnesota took it to them. Yep. So we are right there. Our next big games against Indiana Thursday, and then the game against Nebraska is postponed on Sunday because of COVID problems. I think Nebraska purposely inflicted COVID within the program just so they could ignore the rest of the basketball season. But we do wish a speedy recovery to the mayor who is diagnosed with COVID and the rest of the Nebraska team. Bryce, I'm coming down Wednesday. I'm going to come see you guys.
I heard that. I'm pumped. Can't wait.
Flying out to Texas this weekend to go see cousin Mike, and then I'll be coming back Sunday. So we got a big eventful weekend planned for me.
Yeah, it'll be good to see old Mike. Are you sore right now? You had a little snowboarding this last weekend.
No, I'm not. I made sure this last week on Monday that I did leg day. Prepare the quads and get into it. But I only had about one big fall. Luckily, I was with my girlfriend who's kind of learning how to snowboard. So most of the day I was kind of just lollygagging around with her, making sure she could get from A to B or down to slopes. But it was a good time. Snowboard, ski about 2-3 times a year. So it's always good to get back on the slopes.
Yeah, it's always a good time. Well, we've got an eventful week. Hawkeye sports are hot. Got good playoff football coming up, so it should be a fun week. Excited for everyone to hear this episode. Let's get into it. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Iowa Chill Show. We're back. It seems like we haven't recorded for a while, Nate. We had Luca Garza 2 weeks ago, and then we had Tim Flattery of the Moonlight Graham Show last week, but we recorded those back to back. We're coming back with another great guest, Keith Murphy, the sports legend of Iowa. Keith, welcome.
Luca Garza and Moonlight Graham. I'm in good company there. Both those guys are having good years.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like you were. Go ahead, Nate.
I can attest that none of them probably jumped 6'4" in high school, unlike Keith Murphy.
Well, just don't ask me to do that today. It's been a while.
This is 6'4" in high jump?
It is. It would be less impressive if it were long jump.
That's for sure. Or pole vaulting.
It seemed high at that time, but that's a lot of years ago. That's the early 80s.
So not to get into it, but does that how old are you, Keith?
I am 56.
Gotcha. And Were you born and raised in Iowa?
I wasn't. I was born and raised early part of my life in Vermont. And then we moved to Florida, and I went to high school in Florida. I went to college in Georgia, and ended up going to Iowa, moving to Iowa for a job, and thought I would be here a couple of years. Loved it, and it's more than 30 years now.
Gotcha. What brought you here, and what got you started in media?
I got started in media just as a way to stay connected to sports. I was playing football, part of the scrubs at Valdosta State University, and I got injured and wanted to stay involved in sports. And it wasn't something at that time, the way you think of it now, like a lot of people want to get into sports broadcasting or think of that. I hadn't really thought of it for reasons I don't completely understand. I was a sports medicine major at the time, and a couple of the assistants on the team had suggested that I go to the campus television station, radio station, maybe stay involved. They thought that was something that I would be okay at. I was terrible at first, but I loved it, and I just stayed with it. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job while I was still in college at the local ABC affiliate. And after I graduated, at some point, the station there transferred me into the news department at a different station. And I was so naive, I didn't realize that I could turn it down. I thought I had to go into news. So once I did that, at some point I said, news isn't for me. It doesn't fit my personality, although it did help me learn how to be a better broadcaster. But I said, I'm going to take the first sports offer I get. And that came from WOI in Ames. At the time, it was on Iowa State's campus. And I moved to Iowa sight unseen, pulling a U-Haul behind the Honda Accord. And first time I was ever in Iowa was when I moved in to start anchoring that same week.
That's cool. You've come a long way. You're now one of the most notable sports guys in the state. And, I grew up watching SoundOFF and all that stuff. So it's really great to meet you virtually, which seems to be more of the case these days. But what are some of the things that kept you here? Why do you stay in Iowa?
I think it's more than anything just the sense of community. I mean, Iowa has its flaws like all states and all communities, but I think it's better than any place. I mean, I really do believe it's great here. It's a great place for family. Just covering the sports scene, the way people would come together for a high school football game or a basketball game or wrestling, which was really relatively new to me because where I went to high school, where I went to college, there wasn't wrestling. I mean, I knew what it was, but I knew it from the Olympics and from movies. It wasn't something I grew up with the way I did the other sports. And where I grew up, especially in Florida, I think Vermont is more like Iowa, but in Florida, nobody knew their neighbors. Like we didn't know the neighbors to our left or to our right. There were no block parties. There was no checking on somebody when they were on vacation. We didn't really know each other's names. I mean, I had my friends, but the sense of neighborhood is just so different there. It's like some people move to Florida to be left alone. And when I got to Iowa, that was so different, especially it made a big impact on me. But when I was first at WOI, we would travel around and play against basketball teams, just like, fun charity basketball games at little small gyms in these little rural communities. Or in the summer, we would play softball games and, the community would turn out. And it was like a throwback of nostalgia. It was the way my parents would describe life more than what I was used to in Florida. It was like a throwback in time. So I loved it and I just wanted to stay here. And then I was fortunate in media to have a job where I felt appreciated and been paid well and had a good life. And when you have something like that, sometimes it's okay to be happy where you are. And I've seen some of my friends who would come on here and tell you this. They were, chasing that next rung on the ladder and ended up realizing that, maybe Ben Jacobson's onto something at Northern Iowa. If you're happy where you are, it's okay to stay and have more in your life than your job.
Yeah, Keith, kind of like what Bryce said, I grew up watching. I'm originally from going to Iowa, so always.
And how old are you guys?
25.
25.
I'm 25.
Golly, I grew up. Yeah, it makes sense though. You're younger than I've been on the air here. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yep. So I always grew up watching SoundOFF. I appreciate that. What I've more fallen in love with over your career would probably be RVTV. You guys started that about 3 years ago.
We
more than that. I can't remember.
The first one we did was in it was in 1997 in Ames, when the first RVTV I did was at Channel 5.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's that long ago. And just a bit of a background on that. The reason we did it is it was at the end of Iowa's 15 wins in a row over Iowa State. And there was so little interest in the game. My boss at the time said, "Hey, how can we kind of make this interesting?" And I said, let's come up with this over the top promotional campaign that the game is so big, our sports team is camping at the stadium. And this is back when Jack Trice Stadium, I don't even know if you're old enough to remember this, but it was more like almost like a Division II school. That, you know, the end zones were empty and it was just stands on each side. It was nothing like it is now. And they let us pull our camper like right there by the field. And I stayed there for a week. I just slept there. The two sports guys, Rod Bodholt and Jeff Grummer, were both married with families. So they would go home each night. I just slept in the RV, and it became this fun thing. And then Iowa beat Iowa State again, but people liked it. And then when I got to WHO to 13, we started doing it there. A couple of times I've stopped just because I felt like, boy, we're going to jump the shark here. I don't know what else we can do. And then management has wanted to bring it back, and we've tried to think of a new way. So at some point, instead of just parking at Kinnick Stadium or parking at Jack Trice Stadium, we started stopping along towns on the way to the game, and that kind of re-energized it. So all told, we've done more than, around 20 over the years.
Okay, cool. So I was way off in the 3 years, but Keith, you guys typically stop up around Humboldt, Iowa. My parents they make sure they go out of their way to come see you all the time in Humboldt. The people of Algona want to know, what do we have to do in Algona to make RVTV stop in Algona for the next trip? Is that
Algona? It mainly just takes somebody from the town contacting. John Sears is kind of the guy who organizes the towns. And the most important thing, like sometimes viewers will say, "Hey, we want RVTV," and then this comes as news to the people who actually run the town and can make the streets available and can make it part of the community that weekend. So it just kind of takes a willingness from the community leadership, like the Chamber of Commerce or the mayor or somebody like that, to want to have it. And when they do, we try to get to new places. We always try to have like a stop like Humboldt or Albia, places that have really gone over the top and done a great job, and then try to have some new stops too, so we can experience some new towns. And I love that. It's an exhausting week, but it's fun because it reminds me, and I need this reminder, it reminds me of how, for the most part, the CyHawk rivalry is fun, because I get lost on Twitter sometimes, or social media, or emails to SoundOFF, and I feel like it's just hateful and spiteful, the rivalry. But most people aren't like that. Most of it's good natured, but you can lose sight of that, and that helps us kind of reconnect with, families are divided, neighborhoods are divided, people poke fun at each other, and of course they want to win, but it's not nasty for the most part. There is some nastiness, but I pay too much attention sometimes to the extremes.
And it's hard not to. We were talking with Tim that's kind of where the real battle is won. The Twitter football field is a lot more aggressive than the actual football field sometimes. But that's good for media. I mean, we try to keep it, PG-13 and all fun and no hate, but it can get pretty brutal. Some of the messages are not always so kind, and not so much this is a exhibit or this is a football game, and more of like this is life or death. But
right,
it's it's fun to play into that, especially as media guys.
Yeah, and we're part of that too. I mean, I'm sitting here saying that it's a negative, that I sometimes take the bitterness of it or the nastiness of it, but I'm also part of the machine that feeds that. There's no doubt about that. You know, daily talk radio show, SoundOFF on Sunday nights. We just started our 25th year, which kind of coincides with your ages, so that makes sense. Yeah, all of that feeds it. Twitter, Facebook. I mean, there are times, if I'm being honest, I'm not necessarily trying to stir the pot, but as I post something, I just know it's going to turn into this Cyclone Hawkeye thing, whatever it is. You know it when you see it. You're like, oh man, it's going to take one comment and then it's just going to go nuts, and it does. And for the most part, I think people understand what they're doing when something really important happens. Most of us have the perspective like, oh, there's sports anger, and then there's real life anger. You know, there's those things that really matter, and then there's sports hate and there's real hate. Real hate is awful. Sports hate is supposed to be fun, and there's supposed to be a point you don't cross.
Right.
And
At
most
some level,
people
there
don't
should be
cross.
respect.
Yeah, there should be some respect mixed in there, but for the most part, it's I think people get it. There's some people that lose a little perspective, and I do think that it's easier for that to happen in the social media world because we don't see people face to face anymore. So it is easy to sit behind a keyboard and take out your frustrations on the world, on somebody else. And I don't think a lot of times you would walk up to that person, especially if that person is an athlete, like these people who tweet at the athletes, or at the people who are out there putting it all on the line, and they make a mistake, and then these people get the Twitter muscles and they tell them how much they suck or something. I mean, it's hard to picture that person walking up to Davion Nixon or Mike Rose face to face and telling them like, hey, you really sucked Saturday. But it's easier to do, especially those who remain anonymous.
Certainly. Yeah, I think some of those guys have fielded some of the hate. Jordan Bohannon went through a cold shooting slump and fielded a bunch of it, and he answered right back. But yeah, it is funny just to see how that can go from sports to real anger. Speaking of crazy fans, you take in fan calls. You're on the air every week. Do you have any funny fan moments or crazy TV bloopers that really stick out in your mind?
Oh gosh,
David from Marshalltown.
Which one?
David from Marshalltown.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he went into his basement. Yeah, that he's David from Marshalltown on the Murph and Andy show. He's been this guy that slowly over time has revealed things. He's a sanitation worker in Ankeny, and years ago he was so upset about the Hawkeye Wisconsin game, I believe it was, football game, that he called from his basement, and Andy, who is, kind of grumpy a lot of the time, he picked up that, hey, this guy really sounds like he might be struggling, as we all sometimes care a little bit too much about sports. And Andy kind of took over and talked him out of this darkness a little bit. And then he did call back. And then over the years, and then this year we had this tremendous reveal that his wife is a hardcore Cyclone fan. And we didn't see that coming at all. But yeah, guys like that are fun. I think most of my bloopers over the years on SoundOFF and to some extent on the radio show, I have always had this problem that when something really strikes me funny, I can't control it. I just start laughing like a little schoolgirl. And I get this high-pitched, embarrassing laugh. And Andy has laugh locked me several times with several different things, including one time just letting go of a silent but deadly one right there on the set that struck me funny as it wafted over to me. And over the years, that's been maybe the biggest blooper, is just getting that laugh. And I can remember even as a kid when I was an altar boy at church, goofing around and starting to laugh. And then you're not supposed to laugh, just like when you're on television, you're not supposed to laugh. and that makes you
It makes
laugh
it
more.
funnier.
Oh man, I've had a few of those experiences on the altar.
Yeah, I'm like, oh yes, yeah. I'm like Jimmy Fallon on Saturday Night Live when he would break almost in every sketch he was in, and Andy is one of those guys that can just keep a stone face no matter what. He does not start laughing. And the few times I've made Andy laugh, I thought, well, that must really strike him funny, because that guy never breaks. And it's only been a few times over 20 years that he's broken. But me, he'll probably break me tomorrow.
That's great. Speaking of some of your co-hosts throughout the years, one of the most notorious ones, one of my favorite ones, was Chris Hassell.
Yeah.
Do you have any what's the funniest experience or craziest story that you've experienced of Chris Hassell?
Oh, gee, there are so many. You should have him on your show. And boy, he's a character. Chris is, first of all, he's actually one of the nicest people I've ever known. But he's always been, from the moment I met Chris, I was fascinated with him, because I was like, this guy is more comfortable on the air than he is off. He's like a broadcasting savant. And I don't think I had ever met anybody like that. Like, we hired Chris when he was just finishing college, and he was 22 or something. He had won that broadcasting contest, and he got to do some of the game with Gary and Ed Podolak. Dolph and Podolak, he got to call part of an Iowa game for winning a contest when he was in high school or college. And they had him, he was supposed to do one drive, and they kept him on several drives because he was so good. And then we ended up hiring him later. Rod Peterson, my boss, saw him at something where he got all these awards for his work in college. And then Rod brought him in for an interview, and it just immediately became apparent, like, this guy is the opposite of anybody else I've known, including myself. He's trying to get more comfortable at life when he's not nervous on the air. Like, when he's broadcasting, that's his comfort zone. That's his confidence. But like we would bring him to a social situation, like a night out. Maybe we're going to Cooney's all to have a pint, or we'd have Andy's 40th birthday party was here 10 years ago. We'd have Chris over, and it took us a while, Andy and I, to realize, oh, this guy is basically shy. And you would never think that from watching his sketches on SoundOFF or watching him on the air. But like, I've learned about many comedians and some people in Hollywood, sometimes because of their persona, you assume, oh, that person's really outgoing and just bursting with social confidence. And it wasn't the case. And then Chris, as soon as he would get to know everybody, like when we'd go to Cooney's for what we call media night after work, after the 10 o'clock news, he would go in there, and once he knew everybody at the table over time, it was like he was holding court. I mean, it's some of the funniest things I've ever seen. But like that first time, he would just be, just over in the corner somewhere, just kind of uncomfortable. And that is how he was. He's like that on RVTV too. He would people would come by, and we'd hand out pictures, and some people would want us to sign them, and we'd talk to people, and Chris would kind of hide off into the corner sometimes because he was uncomfortable. And he's gotten better and better about that over time. But you guys as broadcasters too, you probably know somebody that's maybe something like that, but it was fascinating to me. And the RVTV is when he would come the closest to getting us in trouble. It's usually something he was doing for on air. But like one year at Jack Trice Stadium, he took a bullhorn. We bought one of those police style bullhorns, and he walked around campus in Hawkeye gear and just riled up Cyclone fans and basically insults. And at some point, a couple of guys picked him up and threw him into one of the fountains on campus there, and it kind of rattled him because we got it on camera too, so it made the story better. But for Chris, for a little bit, it shook him up. And then he was invited to speak at the pep rally. It was like the sober pep rally. It was for some kind of organization, no drinking, but a big pep rally the night before the game. And he got on there and he stripped out of his Cyclone gear and he had all this Hawkeye gear on and he's just getting the crowd all riled up. Made for good television, but made us worry about him. And then the most over the line thing he did that probably could have led to trouble. RVTV down in Pella, we had this, for some reason they gave us this pace car that had, you know, like a police lights on top, and it had a siren and the light on the side. And Chris was so fascinated by it. He just drove around Pella and basically scared people. He'd like turn the lights on. He'd like, ma'am, what is in that bag you're carrying there? Are you allowed to have, do you have a license for what's in that bag? And, you know, everybody, the way we respond to authority, nobody had reason to believe, oh, this is some TV guy that's jacking around with us. They took it seriously, and you're not supposed to do that. I think that's probably, are we past the statute of limitations?
At some point, I feel like that it's not acceptable, but especially
it's definitely not acceptable.
The good people of Pella are not used to that kind of commotion. We
no, we found the one bar in Pella too. It wasn't easy to find. But have Chris on sometime, and what he'll do is try to make all of this my idea, but don't believe that. It's all his idea.
I did reach out to Chris about a week ago, see if he wanted to hop on. He hasn't responded yet. I think he's maybe a little starstruck by us, but if you could put a good word in for us, let him know.
Yeah, I'll tell him. The name didn't get him. Iowa Chill wasn't enough for an immediate yes.
For an expat, wasn't he born and raised here? Or
yeah, he went to St. Ambrose.
Muscatine. He's from Muscatine. I know.
Yeah, he calls it Musca Vegas.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the times I've driven through there, I haven't felt that Vegas vibe, but maybe I just haven't been to the right place.
I would attest to that. I haven't felt the same way about Muscatine. But moving on about, COVID hits the United States. Iowa takes an immediate impact. I mean, the entire country takes an immediate impact. And you kind of find a light of the way through your social media posting, sharing everyone's at-home videos. Everyone's just doing what they can to abide by the time. And you actually posted one of mine. I don't even remember, but my cousin and I were doing a little trick shot in Iowa City, hitting like a ping pong ball.
Oh, sure.
Awesome cups. And we had the dog in at the end. So you posted that. So that was kind of cool.
Wow. Okay. It's coming together for me now. Yes, I remember that very well. I asked you to send the actual raw footage so I could, or the original copy, so I could put it on the air and it would look better and all that. I remember that whole exchange. Yes.
Yeah. So I appreciate you for doing that. You kind of go into detail about that, just doing what you can to help people feel like, you know, we can get through this, sharing the videos, just make them feel important during these times.
It really came from a somewhat almost selfish point for me. I just felt useless, and sports weren't going on, and I just that time was so hard, especially for the people that were doing important things or had somebody in the family get sick, or frontline workers, or healthcare workers. There's this feeling just sitting at home of God, I'm not doing anything. What can I do with the limitations of what I have to try to at least feel a little bit useful? And I just ask people like, hey, it all feels so negative right now. Send me some positivity. And I was expecting a small response, just something maybe I could put into the sportscast, because at that time we weren't even sure we were going to be able to continue the sportscast. I mean, if there aren't sports, what do we do in the sportscast? But people just started sending videos, and sometimes it was photos, and it did strike a nerve. And certainly I wasn't the only person to have this idea, but it struck a nerve with people, just like, okay, I want to show we're going to be okay. I want to smile. I want to show that the community is coming together. So sometimes it was, teacher parades, waving at their students. Sometimes it was, it could be something that would move me to tears, like, a woman on her 60th anniversary being on the other side of the glass of her husband in a long-term care facility with their hands, like this, and just, it would hit me in all the feels, that kind of thing. And they just kept coming in, and a couple of times it was there was one that was a I believe it was in Melcher, the Melcher, Dallas area. It was like a rural funeral where, you couldn't have the numbers for a normal funeral or visitation. So all this community and the farmers in that whole area, they lined the road just out of a show of respect for one of the area farmers that had died. And it was so moving. And then somebody, a professional photographer, sent me the video and photos of those just to say, please use these. They weren't worried about credit or anything. They just wanted to share this really moving experience. So all of that kind of took off and filled parts of our sportscast. We did some, tournaments too of best Iowa sports moment and biggest kick to the stones or punch to the gut. And then before you know it, sports was back on. But those positivity moments, they helped me as much as they helped anybody else. But it was just those signs that we're going to be okay. And some of it was just fun. Some of it was just like trick shots, people passing the time like you with I don't know how many takes it took you to do some of those, but that stuff was fun.
We spent hours just trying to perfect one shot. So I was relieved to find out that you were actually going to post it.
Yeah, it was impressive. And people needed that. Because certainly it was understandable and the professional thing to do. But the newscasts in particular just became so heavy. It's just like this cloud of doom. And it was nice to be able to get down to some extent like Ed Wilson and weather, but then down into sports and say like, hey, people can't be together, but they can still find ways to be positive. And some of it was, I'm sure you saw them, some of it was just videos of, softball teams shooting video themselves throwing the ball and then catching it at the next house and going all around their community. And that was fun. And people still get a kick out of being on the newscast for the most part. So I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Keith, now we're going to create some controversy here on the podcast. Keith, if you were to rank the top 3 favorite cities that you enjoy in Iowa or been to or visited or just enjoy the culture other than the major college, the 4 college towns, what would they be?
Mm-hmm. Oh, good question. I think they're probably going to be RVTV cities for me because that's how we've really come to know places and experience places. So love Albia, love the town square, the way people treated us there. We've been there several times, it's a blast. Humboldt, because Humboldt, I feel like no town in America can party like Humboldt. We were there on a Wednesday night one year and they drank the local bars out of Busch Light by like 8 p.m. And people were making runs, hopefully relatively sober people were making runs outside Humboldt to convenience stores to like restock cases of beer so they could keep the night going. And then that night when we were walking around, I've never seen garbage cans more full than they were with Humboldt, and it was all cans. That place, they can party there.
Can you speak to the North Central Iowa Busch Light affinity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of those people are from Laguna and just we have nothing better else to do up there than farm and have a few Busch Lights. Kind of reminds me of the time in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship.
Oh,
bars dry.
Yeah, that's right. You wouldn't think it can actually happen, but it does happen. It does happen. Those are the 2 that stand out to me right away, just for the way we've been treated there, Humboldt and Albia. And locally, I've always felt bad for Farrar. I feel like Bondurant gets all the hype, and Farrar is really left out of the conversation. And I want to do whatever I can to promote Farrar.
I don't know if we played Bondurant in sports, but I don't know if I've actually been to Farrar.
See, right there. What did you say? We played Bondurant. Did you say we played Bondurant Farrar? Nope. Farrar just got left out.
They get left out.
Farrar is always dumped on. It's the Oats of Hall and Oats. Bondurant, Farrar just left out. I'm trying, but I don't know what I can do for Farrar. I'm not even sure if it is. I guess I should look into this. I'm not even sure how much of a town is there.
That's what
but I'm trying to stand up for Farrar.
Well, the good people of Farrar would appreciate that.
So, how much time do we have, Keith?
I'm fine right now.
Okay, awesome.
My wife works from home now, and she wanders around a herd or just walk by. She's been working from home for like how long's it been? 10 months probably?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
Yeah, there was a time, couldn't imagine her working from home, and now she's here every day, and I've done quite a bit of work from home. There's some things that have been changed that aren't probably going to go back to the way they were.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that's my dad too. He's worked at Pellicorp for 25 years, and he was a guy that had never worked from home. And over the last 10 months or so has gotten used to it. And he's like, okay, there are some things that we definitely don't need to do in the office. There's things that, are better in the office, but it's a different environment. It's definitely interesting to have mom and dad at home at the same time. So I've heard when I visit, it doesn't seem like anything's different, but the day-to-day is interesting.
Yeah. And I think the businesses have also figured out that they can save on rental space, and
for sure
they can have people work from home. In some cases, like I know where my wife works, they had an even more productive year, not a less productive year. And I think the owners worried at the onset of this that, everybody's going to slack off from home, and what's going to happen to productivity. But it actually went up because I think some people had more life balance. And from broadcasting, there's been some real positives, but there's also been concerns for me. You start to worry about these conglomerates. Are they going to continue to now save money by having people broadcast from their homes, not have to pay their hotel, their travel? I mean, even when Iowa was playing Northwestern on CBS, it was clear that Raftery and Ian Eagle were not at Northwestern.
That was an interesting broadcast for sure. I didn't know what to think of that. And
I'll be right back. I have to shut the door. My wife's being really loud.
Sounds good. And Nate, we're a little bit new age here. So, I mean, we're a little bit more used to it, but it has been interesting to see how some of the older generation has gotten used to it. But personally, that was something that I was more accustomed to. And this is really just business as usual. But it was interesting to see how some of the older generations have gotten used to that work from home.
Well, right. And I can tell you that Keith is not shoveling the driveway.
Yeah, that's right. I
funny picture.
Do whatever I can to avoid shoveling the driveway, and that's the best part of having boys. I'll bet you both have done some shoveling in your time.
Most certainly. Yeah. We do one of those fancy HOA fees now that doesn't actually end up getting done, so we still kind of shovel. And I don't have kids of my own yet to make that happen, so working on it. So if we can get into Iowa sports now, I want to hear about what your thoughts are on the best sports story in Iowa going on currently.
Oh, well, I think that's a broad question, but the first thing that comes to mind is the Hawkeye basketball team, because I think that's a legitimate Final Four potential team. I think there's some questions there, and we don't know yet. And you guys have grown up with the NCAA tournament, so a one-game knockout, what that can do. You should never assume that a team, just because they're talented, like we knew at the beginning of this year, between the three of us, we probably would have picked 3 of the 4, if not all 4 of the college football playoff teams.
Yep.
But maybe we put Oklahoma in over Notre Dame or something. I don't know, but we know who's
rotation of 6 right now.
Yeah, in basketball, you don't have that, and part of it is that one-game knockout. Some of it's a numbers game, and that it's easier to compete with when you have 5 players instead of 22 that are needed. But Iowa has that potential when they're playing well and Jordan Bohannon is hitting shots. They could be that good. So that's worth watching. We haven't had Haven't had an outright Big Ten conference champion from Iowa in decades. You know, Iowa State won some conference championships at the turn of the century with Larry Eustace, and both Iowa and Iowa State and UNI and Drake have won some conference tournament championships, and Drake and UNI have won some conference championships. But of the big two of Iowa and Iowa State, it's been a long time, but Iowa's a legitimate conference championship contender and a legitimate Final Four contender. And that doesn't happen very often around here. So I think that's the biggest story going on right now, but it all feels a little bit like, can we get there? I mean, as we record this right now, Drake, which is undefeated, and Iowa State are on pause from COVID. And Fred Hoiberg, who I just was exchanging texts with before I talked to you, he's been pretty sick, and he has COVID-19, and Nebraska's on pause. So just right around us here, we can see how precarious all this is, that we can't just count on getting to the finish line here. And that would be so hard. Not the most important thing, but it's already hard that we can't have crowds to enjoy this. I mean, for Hawkeye fans to enjoy this, or Cyclone football fans to enjoy what they had this season.
Certainly. I mean, that's a huge deal, especially in the conference that the Hawkeyes are in. You go on a normal year to the RAC or, the I-Zone in Michigan State, and that's a big deal to play against those crowds. To get a victory on the road is a lot different this year than normal years, I'd say. It
is. It gives road teams a better chance. I don't know if Las Vegas has fully caught up. It probably has by now. NFL, college football, college basketball, the home court, home field advantage isn't what it usually is, for reasons we can all easily understand. The crowd is missed, and the crowd doesn't impact the energy. And on some subconscious level, it doesn't impact officiating the way it sometimes can. I mean, research has shown that no officials are trying to be there on behalf or consciously are trying to favor the home team, but subconsciously, many of us are people pleasers. And when the crowd gets on you, or the crowd is right there, sometimes it can eke into the way games are officiated just on a subconscious level to people please. And we're not really getting that. But even the 20% crowds, like the Big 12 championship game in Dallas, that was so much better than the Fiesta Bowl for atmosphere. I mean, even 10 to 20,000 people in the stands makes a huge difference versus the empty stands and the fake crowd noise.
Totally.
Right. And it's just like, it's such an unfortunate time. Like, you think about it, we're blessed with these rare opportunities that we have the number one wrestler in the country, the number one basketball player in the country, arguably the best freshman girls basketball player in the country, Ashley Jones at Iowa State. Iowa State knocks off Baylor for their 61 home game winning streak. Iowa State has their best football season in program history, and we're not able to go there and spectate. And that's just a very frustrating part of the seasons. But, we're blessed, obviously, with TV. We're able to watch them, but obviously we wish times like this we could just go there and support them in person.
Yeah, it's something that never can be completely made up either. I mean, it's the Iowa State football fans, even in your relatively short lives, the history of Iowa State football, and it's been bleak. And even the times where Iowa State is almost there, it seems like something came along and, Lucy pulls the football away from Charlie Brown, and you have this breakthrough year, and every game would have been sold out. The tailgating, which is great at Jack Trice Stadium, that would have been unlike anything we've ever seen. Can you imagine the Dallas takeover by Cyclone fans for the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma? Yeah. But the people who were there, some of them weren't even comfortable sharing photos because they didn't want to be shamed on, Twitter or Facebook. Sure. Hey, why are you being irresponsible? What are you doing down there? So that wasn't as enjoyable. And then you finally get to a January bowl game after 100+ years of football, and no one can be in the stands. And you're playing a team whose record was, I think, 4-2. They played 6 games. and we're there because the other team in part couldn't play in its conference championship game because they declined to do so. So there was just all of that. It was still a wonderful season and something that Cyclone fans love. But right now, they're more excited about all this talent returning and thinking, boy, wouldn't it be fun to experience the tailgating and home crowds and travel with a great team? And they're hoping it happens next season. And same with Hawkeye basketball here, to just not be able to experience that in person. I think you can make the case, barring injury or COVID shutdown, that Luka Garza is going to be the most productive player in the history of college basketball in this state, from the entire Big Four: Iowa State, Drake, UNI. I mean, he's going to be a 2-time consensus All-American and 2-time Player of the Year. He didn't win them all last year. He didn't win the 2 big ones, but he will likely win those this year unless something changes. And he's going to be Iowa's all-time leading scorer, and Iowa looks like it's going to stay in the top 10. So that's an recent unprecedented year of success for Iowa basketball and Iowa State football. And there is something missing when the fans can't enjoy it. The flip of that, as you guys well know, is think how much harder this would all be to sports fans if we didn't at least have this to watch.
Right.
So, I mean, even in the media, it's harder to cover these. We can't get one-on-one with people. Everything is on the other side of a screen. It's not the same, but it's better than nothing. And that's a whole nother conversation, whether it's all worth it. But we're thankful for what we have, but no one's going to think that this is the same as it would be if fans were allowed to participate. I miss fans. I think we've seen how important fans are.
Yeah, it brings a whole different energy. And I think there's a lot of hope for this year being closer to what it was the year before in 2019. I also think there's a hope for longevity in some of these programs. You hear a lot about anytime that the Cyclones start doing well, you hear Matt Campbell is moving on in the rumor mill. I think there's a lot of hope that he can stick around. You mentioned Jacobs. Guys like him at UNI who have stuck around and decided that, sometimes it is okay to be, happy with what you got and building a program. What is your personal opinion on the Matt Campbell situation? And how long do you think he'll be a part of Iowa State?
I think he'll definitely be there next season. That's the only thing I would commit to at this time, just because I don't know him well enough to really offer a strong opinion. I think at some point, you do need to give someone credit for doing what he said he's going to do. He has said that he was here to build something. People didn't believe that. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, probably 3 years ago, Kirk Herbstreit was saying publicly that Matt Campbell is gone. I mean, not that he might be gone, that he's gone. Just no way Iowa State can keep him. And he's still there. Yeah. If he was just chasing more money, or a job where it's easier to recruit or has had more history, he'd have already been gone. I think we do need to take him at his word now that he is here to build something. But when does that build end? And he feels like he needs another challenge? I couldn't say. I do think he'll be here next year, even if he gets some offer that is generational wealth or something that resembles a job that he wanted when he grew up. Like Fred Hoiberg always wanted to coach in the NBA. So when that opportunity came, he just couldn't turn it down. I do think no matter what comes up now, that Matt Campbell will be the coach next year. All these guys returning after that, I don't know. I think he plans to stay. I don't think he's looking around, but he doesn't even have an agent. But I think he's going to take calls. I think he's going, if somebody shows interest, I mean, wouldn't you listen, see what they say? But I think for him, he's shown that he's loyal. He's got a family, kids. I think he knows that Ames is a great place to raise a family. The guy probably can't buy a meal or a beer or anything as is. I mean, he doesn't. How much money do you need in Ames, Iowa? He's got enough. But he has proven something that I didn't think possible. I mean, I did not think Iowa State could get to this level in football. I thought they could get close, and Dan McCarney did a lot, but I didn't think they could go toe to toe with Oklahoma. And they're not going to turn into, they can't, not in this part of the country. They're not going to turn into an Alabama or an Ohio State or an Oklahoma. I don't think you could do that at Iowa or Iowa State. But I think you can do what I think a really good coach can do what Kirk Ferentz has done at Iowa and what Matt Campbell looks like he can do at Iowa State. And that's no small thing. And I think you can be really happy there. Now, people are going to want more. Once you raise the bar, they want more. And I'm old enough to remember when all Iowa State fans wanted was to beat Iowa 1 year in football.
Yep.
And then they did, and then you want more.
I have a grandfather that would not be very pleased with your last comment about not being able to build in Alabama, but I think that is probably the reality. He's on the board of Fire Ferentz as soon as we start having a 7-5 or 8-4 season. But he is getting older, and he's entitled to his opinion.
I just think it's harder than people realize. We're a state of 3 million people. We're the only state that has a Big 10 and a Big 12 team. And it's just, there's not a huge base to pull from here. So you got to go get other people's recruits, other states' recruits. And if you grow up in Texas or Ohio or Florida, and you get offered by the University of Texas or the Florida Gators or Ohio State, that's where you're going. You're not going to Iowa or Iowa State. So you are going to have to do more with less. And I think what Ferentz has done at Iowa is underrated. I think that as time goes on, you start to forget pre-Hayden Fry, when it was like 20 or 30 years of losing terrible football in front of mostly empty stadiums in Iowa City. But Fry comes in, he raises the bar. Ferentz has a couple of down years, and then he keeps that going. And it's what you start to get used to. And at Iowa State, I mean, there was a time where it's just, if you could just beat Iowa, if you could just beat a good team for a change, could just win a bowl game. Iowa State never won a bowl game until you guys were born. I mean, that's not that long ago. Their first bowl win was the Insight.com Bowl, which was 99 or 2000, something like that. Wow. So the bar keeps getting raised, but Campbell also, he's doing it with advantages like Dan McCarney never had either. That the stadium didn't used to look like that. The facilities, the budget. I mean, it is easier now with television rights and streaming to get people to come and play. And it's harder to be a brand that just coasts on your name, as Nebraska has found out. I mean, did you ever think Nebraska would be, 4 years in a row without a bowl game?
No, but we love it.
Yep. It's one of the better things that's happened in the recent years.
It's hard to imagine. And they're never going to get back to, they just can't in this climate. Nebraska cannot get back to where they were, but it's hard because many of the people who are now the big boosters and the hardcore fans, they're aging, but they can remember national championships, not just one, but like competing for that year after year. And when you're used to that, it's hard to be in the middle of the Big Ten West, or not the middle, the lower half.
For sure. Keith, are you a sports gambler, sports bettor?
A little bit. I'm not good at it. About what I can do is when my wife and I go to Las Vegas or occasionally to a casino, we set aside what our discretionary fund is that day, same way we do to like going to a movie or a theme park or something. And then she goes and she likes to play slots and stuff like that, which I see the same as just like throwing your money out into the street. So in those circumstances, I can go over, sit in the sports book, get a beer and some chips, bet $5 or $10 on a game, and just sit there and watch it and be content for a few hours. But I can't put big money down. I don't have, it gives me too much anxiety.
Yeah,
I can't do it.
I'm on board with that. I'm the king of the $1 bet. I've recently got into it, so I know very little. But do you have any opinions on it? is it inevitably going to be legal across the United States? And how do you think it affects the game as a whole, or the way that people think about the game?
I think it is going to be legal. I think it's well on its way to being legal everywhere. I think it's good to pull it out of the shadows and let states benefit from the gambling. It's not like if you make it illegal, you're going to stop it. It's still, there's still widespread gambling. You just don't get any taxes on it. There's no benefit from it. So I think it's okay to do this. We all worry and should worry about those who get addicted or can't stop it or end up being irresponsible. And, you know, next thing you know, they've lost their house or their car or their job. I mean, there are real stories like that out there. But I think that for those who can responsibly gamble, it's fun. We've been doing it for years. I mean, the NCAA tournament, a large part of its popularity is the pool, the office pool, and that's gambling. And it's fun. And we do that. And you see that fantasy football has been a huge part of the NFL success. I don't get involved in that because the one year I did it, I didn't like the way it just completely changed how I watched the game. I started rooting for yards and touchdowns versus
right. And that's what I'm seeing now too. And that's why I ask, is because I'm 2 or 3 weeks into it and it changes the way I think about the game. So I'm not sure how I feel about that personally. Maybe that's a personal issue. But I just see that sometimes that can be a thing where you start putting money on the line and all of a sudden the integrity of the game and the original reason why I started watching as a kid is no longer there. But I don't know. It definitely makes it more intriguing for different reasons.
It does. I think you have to find that balance. Like for me, the fantasy element didn't work because I didn't like the way it watched games. But for some people, that greatly enhances it and makes them want to watch. And for some people, it's like somebody who wasn't interested in watching games, and you know, maybe a wife or husband, and this is their way of having something that they can now enjoy. So I do think it brings in more people. I think we're just getting started on how widespread it's going to be here in Iowa, because right now, like I haven't been in a casino around here. It's probably not the first place most of us think to go during COVID. So I think it's only going to get bigger when all this is said and done. But like just watching Scott Van Pelt's bad beats is enough to make you realize how many times it can be cruel. I suppose you could also say you can be on the other side of those bad beats and you're ecstatic, but the outcomes of games that can shorten your life, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nate's definitely in the ecstatic room or the ecstatic group. He's just been a big
one. What happens when you sign with DraftKings, you get like $100 free bet. And I've been just been referring friends left and right, and I have nothing to lose, only to gain, and I've just been on the lucky side. So that's been kind of fun for me. But I do my best not to listen to Scott Sipker. Whatever he says, I do the opposite.
He has lost more houses than he claims. He's still ahead, but it doesn't feel like it. But that could be, I don't know, it could be your heightened sense of awareness. I know, like the Iowa State football game, I know I'm way ahead on predicting who's going to win it, but the only time I hear from people is when I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't hear from people that congratulate you on, hey, good pick. But when you get it wrong, they're like offended by it. I went through like a hell night at Kinnick Stadium with that once, 2002. Which are two great teams. Iowa State, you guys would be too young to remember this, but you probably read about it or aware of it. Iowa State goes down to Arrowhead Stadium and plays Florida State really tough. And Seneca was either in or not in, depending on who you ask. But Florida State ends up winning a really great football game down there. Iowa has that great team that, as it turns out, is only going to lose to Iowa State during the regular season. And that game at Kinnick Stadium was at night, so it was extra drunk. It was enough to make me think we probably shouldn't have Iowa State night games, because, you know, just people are fueling up all day. Yep. And it's September. So it was really, it was a liquored up crowd as you would expect. And I had picked Iowa State to win the game, not because I'm rooting for Iowa State, but because that's who I thought was going to win. And Iowa is up at the half, like 24-7, something like that. Ed Podolak is saying we'll see you at the celebration. You know, he's telling listeners we'll see you at the post-game party, all this. It did feel over. And people in the crowd were just raining down. I mean, Hawkeye fans were, some of them, there are few, it felt like hundreds, but they're yelling at me and swearing at me about, you know, yeah, how's that pick? I like that pick. Murphy, you cyclone. I mean, they're just like, look, you choke on your pick, you cyclone homer. I mean, they're yelling at me, and you can see like the veins coming out of the heads of some of them. And I'm ignoring it. And Andy, who's next to me, shooting the game with a camera, he's just getting more and more. He's just turning around, and I'm like, ignore it. It's fine. It's just, I don't take it personally, because I don't take it personally. I mean, it's that angry winner syndrome, you know, where it's like, choke on it. We won, not you. So they're doing all that, and they're raining down. And as you probably know from your history, Iowa State just pours it on the third quarter. Seneca Wallace, it just dominates with some unbelievable play. Game feels over by the end of the third quarter. Iowa State has not only come all the way back, but has taken the lead. Brad Banks has a hand or wrist injury, drops the ball a couple of times. Iowa State wins the game. Well, as the game goes on, Andy turns around to each of these fans and like gets video of them. These fans that were yelling and cussing at me. He shoots video of them. And then the next night, he does What's Bugging Andy on these people who were swearing at me and yelling at me. Not anybody who was good natured, but the ones who were like really angry, and they were probably liquored up. And one of them called the station and apologized and said, is there any way you could not show the video again? My wife is really embarrassed. I drank too much. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. Really nice. It was sincere. And we did stop showing the video, and we did take it down. Took the video down. Andy had to be convinced of that, because he was like, no, I was acting that way in public.
Right.
But like his wife was, you know, people called after SoundOFF, and they're like, oh man, how embarrassing, that kind of thing. That's just an example of kind of how we can get too emotionally invested, whether through gambling or in this case, is long-winded story about how no one remembers your correct picks. You remember when somebody's wrong. Like if Iowa State had been up at the half, those people wouldn't have been yelling praise down to me about my brilliant pick. And at the half, if I could have switched the pick, I would have. I felt completely wrong. It's like, God, how did I think Iowa State was going to win this? You know, I don't know. I'm
sure.
Even through the limited gambling I've done, I'm sure you guys have participated in some kind of picks pool. When you're right, you feel like, I'm pretty good at this. And then when you get it wrong, sometimes you feel like, why didn't I say this? It seems so easy now. Why didn't I get this?
Yeah, Bryce and I learned never bet the over on the Wisconsin games.
Oh yeah, that's good advice.
My Lord.
Yeah, that's good advice.
I'm doing well on picking the over on the Hawkeye games, though. They're scoring a bunch of points. You're on the hot seat, Keith. You just mentioned a story of making maybe the wrong pick. Turns out it's in your favor. We're going to ask you to do it again. Who is your Super Bowl prediction? First, who do you think is going to be in it, and who do you think is going to win?
I do think it's going to be Packers Chiefs. I've thought that from the start. I certainly wouldn't discount. These are great championship games, by the way. Yeah. I'm really excited to see these. There is the Mahomes question about whether, but I expect him to play. It sounds like he's going to play, and I think the Chiefs are better than the Bills, and I think even with all Tom Brady's accomplishments, and by the way, did you see that he's now won 32 playoff games? The next closest quarterback is Joe Montana with 16. It's insane.
It's almost like the Tiger Woods stats that you see. Like, he's so much further ahead of everybody in the Masters. And I mean, Tom is year after year. Yeah, I mean, I had Breeze in my parlay. I thought the Saints were going to do it this year. And I should never bet against Brady. That man is unbelievable in the playoffs.
Yeah, and his 14th championship game, I think that puts him ahead of the Cowboys all time.
Just nuts.
It is nuts. So you can't discount the Bucks, but I think the Packers there in Green Bay, they look like they've got it going. So I expect the two of them to win, and I have thought all season the Chiefs are going to repeat. So I'm going to stay with that. But I don't always feel like this. I do believe any of these four teams can win the game this weekend and the whole thing. But I maybe partly I'm rooting for it. It hasn't happened since Super Bowl I. But this is really good for Iowa in this area. You know how many Packers and Chiefs fans there are around here. I mean, we kind of have a four-way split in this state: Vikings, Packers, Bears, Chiefs. And the research backs that up. It's almost a 25% split with whoever's doing well at the time. Like right now, there are more Chiefs fans than the other three. Sure. But to have teams this close to us in the Super Bowl, that'd be really cool. So I do think that'll happen.
Yeah, the Midwest Super Bowl. Nate, you got a hot take, prediction for the Super Bowl?
Oh, I'm all aboard for the Rodgers train. I'm kind of like, I'm not a big NFL fan, but if either the Vikings or the Green Bay Packers are doing well, I tend to hop on just because I'm a passionate Iowa Hawkeye fan. So there's no really professional team here just that cheering the state. So I'm going to go with the Green Bay.
Cool. That is, yeah. There's in that game there will be three guys from the Central Iowa Metro League playing the CIML. You have Lazard, of course, from Urbandale, and Dom Daphne, the tight end from Valley High School, plays for the Packers, and Anthony Nelson, backup linebacker for the Tampa Bay Bucks. So three guys from the CIML in the NFC Championship game. And then you go over to the AFC, and you got Neiman with the Chiefs, linebacker, and with the Bills, Ike Butker from Iowa. He's starting left guard. Micah Hyde, AJ Klein from Iowa State's the linebacker, and AJ Epinesa.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that graphic that came up, I think, right at the beginning of Wildcard Weekend, but there was almost 100% probability that somebody from the state of Iowa was going to get a Super Bowl this year.
Oh no, I didn't see that, but that's cool. So yeah, this is where it is. We're the greatest state in the world.
We've really known it all along, and now it's just coming to fruition.
This is proof. We're Iowa chill.
All right. Awesome. All right, Keith, we promise we're going to get you out of here just right after this last question. We appreciate your patience. Bryce, go ahead.
Okay, we got two questions. We have to thank Cookies Barbecue for getting involved early and often as a sponsor on this show. Each week we do the Cookies Saucy question of the week. This week we have two because, Keith, we think you can handle it. Number one, let's say you're going to your girlfriend's. I know you're married, but let's say you're going to your wife's parents for the first time and they ask you to play one song and you have to play this song and really wow them. What is the song that you play?
Now, do I know anything about her parents ahead of time, or
first time meeting?
This first time, so I don't know anything about them.
Very little.
Okay, that is. This is a good question because you have to think it through. Don't want to go too sappy.
Right.
Yeah, that one doesn't work. Suspicious Minds came to mind as a.
Save that for date night.
Yeah, that's not good. Have I told you lately that I love you? That sounds too aggressive. Sounds like you're just going in there to just get right after it immediately. And They're older. See, you're dealing with younger parents, but I'm trying to get in the mindset of let's go with Let It Be by the Beatles. You can't read too much into it. It's a classic. Everybody knows it. And I don't think there's any hidden meaning. So it's just a safe choice because everything else that comes to mind could be interpreted in some way. So I'm going with Let It Be. That's my cookie saucy answer.
You're locked in. Number two, Nate, you got it?
All right. You pick four people to compete with you in a 5-on-5 basketball league that includes the best players in the world.
Oh, wow. Four people to compete with me in a 5-on-5 basketball league, please. Okay, I have Steph Curry, We need
Love
that
it.
outside shooting. Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Luka Doncic,
That's the wrong Luca.
Luka Garza.
There we go.
Is that who you want me to pick? No, I need. Those are I get 4.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you.
Playing as well.
Yeah, with those 4, I don't even need to play. I can just coach, and they can play 4-on-5, and we're gonna be fine.
I don't know. They might need a guy that can. What was it? 6'4"? Could you dunk?
Not. I could grab the rim at one time, but I have kind of small hands, so no.
Yeah, you got to.
Maybe for 3 now you.
Well, Keith, thanks for hopping on today. It was super fun to talk a little bit of what you're doing and the current state of Iowa sports. Best of luck with everything in 2021. Let's hope we have a more fun sports year and a better year overall for everybody.
Oh, I hope for all the same. And thank you for having me on. It's great to see young guys like you, keeping the broadcasting going, taking it in a forward future digital direction. And it was a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for watching and having me be a small part of your life for some of these years. I appreciate it. And
You bet. Always been a big
if I
fan.
can ever help you in any way.
Thanks, Keith.
Appreciate that, Keith. Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Bye, guys. Iowa Chill.